Hi everybody, I'm Kristen. I'm Joe's wife, and this is his YouTube channel. Today we're talking about my last cycling race, and our goal is just to try to promote women's cycling. So at the start of the race here, we're at the Bud Harris track in Pittsburgh, and we're starting off with just an easy neutral lap. So I have raced at this venue probably a handful of times last year, and this was my second time out at my second week racing. The week before I had done 2 races. They had a women's open and a non-binary 4-5 category. For this week's races, they had the women's open, so it's all categories 1 through 5. And they did not have the non-binary 4-5 because they were holding a clinic. So I only did the 1 race this week, and so I changed my goals a little bit. Usually I sit in the back of the peloton and to the outside for most of the race, at least until I feel comfortable with the other riders that are there and comfortable with my own bike handling that day. Since I'm still pretty new to cycling and very new to cycling racing, I do try to do my best drafting, but you will see a lot in this race that there are times that I'm just sitting out there by myself, like I'm doing a little bit right now. The other part of that is I don't have any teammates. I did have a friend that came out last week, and we're not officially teammates, but we did race together and try to help each other. So for this race, I'm by myself, and the other teams, they want to help each other draft, and so it's a little harder for me with less bike handling skills to sneak in there sometimes, unless I'm in the very back. So I did want to try to see if I could stay more on the inside of the track for this race and see how I felt in that position in the peloton. And I do think I get there a few times, but I don't know that I particularly felt any more comfortable being on the inside, other than it was easier to pick up the draft from the inside than it was on the outside of the track. There were quite a few points in this particular race that on this fast stretch we did end up kind of blobbed together, or just slowed down a lot more than usual, and this was one of the times where it just seemed like the whole peloton slowed way back, and you see a rider off the front there, and it was either move out to the outside or brake to get behind the peloton. So I just moved to the outside, and I don't particularly remember this part of the race trying to chase this person, but I did end up off the front here. I think I sat at the front for a little bit to see if this brake was gonna stick before I decided if I was gonna try to go after it. So I'm taking a break here after taking a short pull. One thing I noticed, and I'll speak on this more into the race, I had recently been out when they weren't racing at the oval and had practiced drafting my husband and really worked on drafting through that turn that comes into the finish line. And you're coming from the straightaway that is a lot faster, and after you round that turn there is a slight uphill, and I had really worked on getting a lot of momentum and speed into that faster turn to use that momentum going into the straightaway, and I feel like I would have benefited a lot more not drafting at times in that turn, or at least where I was particularly positioned. I think on that last turn I had to brake, and then after we got out of the turn, then a gap opened up because I had braked there instead of being able to use the speed that I had going into the turn. Still working on figuring out when a brake is going. Sometimes someone pushes the pace a little bit, but it doesn't turn into a brake, and the peloton just kind of strings out like it is right here, and a few times that has turned into like I'm in the very back of the peloton and the peloton is stringed out and a brake will go, and then it's much more difficult to try to go chase something like that. So here's an instance where I tried being on the inside and I still ended up out of the draft. I don't say they way slowed down, but I've just been in other races where that straightaway is so fast, and I talked to one of the other riders after this race that this race was difficult in different ways, but it wasn't as fast as some of the other races that we've both done, and we didn't see any breakaways stick or anything. It was different. So when you're used to the handful of races that you've done going a certain way, and then to have a race like this where the pace was very different, really, you try to develop a strategy for racing by yourself, and then it gets completely thrown out the window when the pace and is completely different. So, but it was a very warm day, so it was very conducive for racing. And I think I'm towards the front of the peloton here. There's a rider that starts to go for a break. I think she comes back to the peloton, but she's on a team, so I just sat here to see if anybody else was gonna go. Again, mostly because I'm still learning, and I didn't want to chase after something if it wasn't going to stick. I was looking more for a counterattack to try to stick in a break. So there were a few preems in this race, so they offer prizes for a particular lap, so it doesn't matter where you finish out for the race. And I'm not sure if that was a preem lap. When I watched this video again, it was hard for me to hear when they were calling some of those out. So you can see we're all back together again. And this is how most of the race goes. Okay, it looks like maybe a rider is taking off towards the front there. Yeah, the pace is picked up, and let's see as we come around the turn. Yeah, there's a rider out front. So again, I'm trying to stay more on the inside, so when I come around that turn, if it looks like a brake that's maybe gonna stick, then try to position myself to go chase it. Again, I'm still coming off of almost 5 months off from a stress fracture in my hip, so I'm still learning a lot of my fitness again after just learning it last summer. So you know, I had one race last year where I chased the brake, and it was extremely challenging for me, and I'm not really sure if I have that fitness currently, so I guess time will tell. But a couple times towards the start line, I did swing out to the outside because my husband was standing there, and you know, sometimes he's able to give me some pointers, or even just to know that, you know, there's a gap behind me. Or so this was probably another time that I just had more momentum, and didn't want to brake, so came to the outside. And I don't think it was until I moved to the outside that I realized that there were two riders up ahead. So one of the nice things about racing at the oval is that, you know, you could try to chase down riders, or you could try going off the front, and you know, if you fail, you hop back on the back of the peloton, hopefully, or, you know, worst case scenario, you just take a break on a lap and hop back in. And you know, obviously some of these riders are looking to win races, and obviously I'd like to place well too, but at the same time, it's a lot of this is a learning experience, and like, what can I do, what strategy works. Sometimes an approach one week doesn't work the next time, you know, but there's not really risk of failure here, you know. So I did put in a pretty good dig to catch these two riders, and then tried to, you know, steady out my pace so they could hop on my wheel, and I was hoping that this would be a brake that would stick. The rider that's directly behind me is a really strong rider. She races a lot with the men. She did this race and then the men's race right after it. So I was feeling pretty confident that if a break could stick and she was in it, she would be one of the people that would make that happen. So, but at this point, she's talking to me. She's letting me know that the peloton is catching us. I asked if one of them wanted to take a pull, and she was like, it's too late, they're already here. So kind of in that moment, I had a couple of choices. So one, sit up and wait for the counterattack, which is what's happening here. So try to rest and go with that. Or two, take off and try to sit, in no man's land by myself and solo a race, or, try to lap the field so I could rest behind the peloton again. And soloing or lapping the field didn't seem like feasible options. So I was pretty tired by the time the peloton caught back up, but so I did take a rest here in the peloton. For whatever reason, the counterattack didn't result in another break. I'm not really sure why, but we're all back together again. I was kind of glad because that was earlier in the race than I was hoping to put in that kind of effort. So, and I think that was the other reasoning that I sat back up and let the peloton come to us, is it was way too early in the race to try to stay up front by myself. So especially second week back, still figuring out, like I said, what your fitness currently is. So just funny watching this video again, because there were a couple times that I was up front that I don't even remember this part of the race. So, and I don't know if I just ended up there because I didn't feel comfortable hopping into the draft in the middle, and I didn't want to be all the way in the very back. So this is a preem lap, so I don't know if you could hear the officials, but they offered some prizes to try to make the race a little more interesting. So I generally am not interested in preem laps, because I know if I gas myself trying to chase that, probably not going to have something left for the finish or other tacks. So but as the race progresses, I tried to stay less in the back and more at least mid-pack. I think for this race I averaged about 22.4 miles an hour. It was a 12.5 mile race, and average power was 143. I think my normalized power was 155. So the draft does make a big difference. So we kind of seemed to bunch up on that fast stretch quite a few times, and then this turn was just much slower than I would have liked, and then these girls take off on the uphill. And when you're in the back like that and you're losing momentum in that turn, then it's more work to catch up every single time going up this small uphill. So I did that a lot last year, just sit in the very back, and then I would be behind coming out of that turn and have to catch up almost every lap. I'm going to try to remember to put on my screen recording for my power and speed and heart rate, so you have a little more idea of what's going on in the race in terms of how fast we're going and how much work I'm putting in the draft versus out of the draft. So I think there were quite a few newer riders in this race, especially since, like I said, there wasn't the 4-5 race. And a couple of them commented afterwards that, when they had gone to the bike clinics, they had worked on, racing in 2 pace lines. So when we got all in a big group instead of 2 lines, that was a little unnerving for them. Not unnerving, but just not what they were expecting. So I've been in the peloton, and when it's been like that, it does take some getting used to. I don't particularly like it either, but I also don't like when it's all spread out because we're in 2 lines. So, and I think racing last year in a couple of the men's 4-5s races helped a lot. That group is really big, and that race is a little bit chaotic, so you get used to that big group draft and really paying attention to what the person in front of you is doing. And I don't know if it was any of the team's strategy to slow down and bunch up before this turn. But like I said before, slowing down a lot coming out of that made coming up this whole stretch up here is a slight uphill. Just made it a lot more work. There's a little commotion there. I think somebody got really close to somebody. I don't know if anybody got bumped, but that's why sometimes I'm not drafting, because I still get nervous with my bike. It's just me, my bike handling. I can fall down all by myself, so I don't need anybody's help doing that. I will say the ladies are pretty, courteous riders. They try to be pretty mindful. Let you know if they're close or moving over. And I've seen maybe 2 close calls, but no crashes or anything like that. Nothing that made me feel like it was an unsafe venue, or and even though there's quite a few different teams here, everybody I think knows each other, and it seems like they train with each other in the greater Pittsburgh area. So it's a friendly group, both the men and the women. And I've had, I know some of the riders know I'm a newer rider, so they have given me some pointers and encouragement. So something I definitely could work on better would be staying in the draft. I don't think I did a horrible job, but definitely I'm just sitting out here I'm not pushing the race, and I'm not benefiting from the draft either, so I was thankful this girl came around to me. Only got to draft her for a minute, so. I think she was thinking about braking, but she looked back a few times and didn't see anybody going. And I don't know if it would have been a good time to go with her. It just seemed kind of late in the race for a break, but like I said, all this is still a learning experience for me, so I didn't see anybody else going with her, so I just kind of sat there and waited. So at this point we have 5 laps to go, and I think because we were just more of a group ride than anybody trying any sprints or anything like that, they did a preem for this lap, I think, to try to get the end of the race to be a little more interesting. So I hate preems at this point in the race. So, but I know I'm not the strongest sprinter, so at this point, we have 2.5 miles to go. I am thinking that what should my finish move be? I need to position myself to be towards the front, and what is my strategy for not getting out sprinted at the end? At this point, I'm just hoping that the whole race has been slow enough that I have a lot in the tank. I don't want to give away the end yet. So rather than, because I have gone too early in the race and then really got out sprinted at the end, and that was frustrating. Because as a runner, I always felt like I had a really strong finish, even in a really long race. And that does not translate to sprinting and cycling at all. So, and unfortunately, I didn't really get to work on anything to really benefit my sprinting this much over the winter. So I know that my sprinting is probably about where, or a little bit worse than where I left off last summer. But the difference last summer, I would just sit in the very back and then hope for the best, and that did not work. So I think in my head, I'm thinking that at lap 2 or 3 is when I really want to be at the front and try to slingshot off the last turn for a strong sprint. So still kind of hanging out, maybe mid-pack here. I think everybody else is thinking the same strategy as me. Again, a lot of this stretch is normally very fast. I think they just slowed to see if anybody would take off too soon. I wasn't trying to take off here. I just didn't want to be on my brakes, so. And I think at times the strategy is to, move over and block riders that maybe you think might try to sprint or break. I don't know that that was really what was, I don't think that's really what was happening there, but there have been a couple races where I felt like they, other teams intentionally moved over because their team was, someone else on their team was, moving up or going to make a move, so. Yeah, so this is where I start to move towards the front. I think this might be the last lap here. For a second, I thought there might be a little bit of a break. I think we all end up back together. Yeah. So I was able to do what I was hoping to do with that finish. and really try to slingshot myself out of that turn. And I thought I had enough for 4th place here. As you can see, I got squeaked out at the end, so still have a lot of work to do on my sprinting finish. But I hope you enjoyed that race. Like I said, everything's still a learning process for me, so I'll be off for a couple weeks, but I hope to have some more videos and that you can see how my racing improves over the season. Thanks.